The girls are fighting. Meg Thee Stallion released her song Hiss, and the internet lost its mind because of the shots at Nicki Minaj. If you haven't heard yet, Megan said, "These hoes don't be mad at Megan, these hoes mad at Megan's Law." And Megan's Law is a federal law that requires sex offenders to register themselves. If you've opened like the Citizen app and you've seen all the sex offenders in your area, that's because of Megan's Law. So what does that have to do with Nicki Minaj? Her husband is a registered sex offender. So Nicki went on to rant on Twitter and eventually released her diss track, Bigfoot, which is definitely a song, but I'm not here to piss the barbs off and give like a critical analysis of the song. I came here today to talk about the long lineage of diss tracks, which is a type of song that in many ways has changed and evolved over the years, but at its core, the diss track has always had one mission. There is a fascinating history here that I want to dive into. But first, look, I got a mic stand. They said it would never happen, and here I am. I read the comments. Thank you for pushing me to get better. I did it. I'm here. And thank you guys in general for all the support on the channel so far. If you want to throw a like and subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it. If you want to see my videos a day early, go to my Instagram and join my broadcast channel. I post them in there one day early every time. One last thing, I'm going on tour this week. So if you're in Seattle, February 10th, if you're in Portland, Oregon, February 11th, come see me in Shy High. It's gonna be a great time. Back to the video. When someone says the phrase diss track, most of us think of rap music. But musicians have been dissing each other in their songs long before the genre of rap was even invented. Back in the year 1800, a German pianist named Daniel Steibelt challenged the legendary Ludwig van Beethoven to a piano duel. Steibelt went first, and he freestyled, ignoring the own music that he brought, and just winged it. He did a really good job, supposedly, but when it was Beethoven's turn, he walked up there and picked up the sheet music that Steibelt had brought, flipped it, and then started playing it backwards and upside down. And he even started adding and embellishing other stuff to make it sound even cooler. This was humiliating to Steibelt, and in some ways, what Beethoven did up there is what I would call the first diss track. I think it might be a little bit closer to what battle rap is today, and Beethoven basically hit Steibelt with the Clarence's parents had a really good marriage, but we gotta start somewhere, and this feels like a good place to start. So before rappers were dropping diss tracks, older rock artists were doing it too. A lot of people might not know that the mega famous song Sweet Home Alabama by Leonard Skinner is actually a diss track to Neil Young. In 1970, Neil Young wrote a song called Southern Man, where he talked about the issue of racism in the South of the United States, and how some of those issues that stem from slavery had never really been resolved by the society of the United States. He said, "I saw cotton and I saw black, tall white mansions and little shacks. Southern man, when will you pay them back?" He compares the colors and the sizes of the houses against each other to show the level of inequality that the American South was dealing with. He made some valid points about how the American society did a poor job of integrating black people after they outlawed slavery and never really leveled the playing field. But a lot of people in the South did not take too kindly to Neil Young's criticisms and his blanket statements about what the American South was like, especially given that Neil Young isn't actually American, he's Canadian. So Leonard Skinner responded to him directly in 1974 on Sweet Home Alabama. And these aren't like petty little subs here, they straight up name drop Neil Young in the song. "Well, I heard Mr. Young sing about her. Well, I heard old Neil put her down. Well, I hope Neil Young will remember. Southern man don't need him around anyhow. Whoa!" Sweet Home Alabama became a huge hit, peaking at number 8 on the Billboard charts, and getting played at like every sporting event in the American South since it came out. Many people will instantly recognize that guitar riff, that boom boom, but they would have no idea that it was a diss track. So Sweet Home Alabama might be the biggest individual diss track in rock music in terms of its own popularity as a song, but it definitely wasn't the only one. Even artists as big as the Beatles were engaging in this petty kind of songwriting. In fact, they were doing it to each other. In 1971, John Lennon dissed his former bandmate Paul McCartney on the song How Do You Sleep. He referenced an old urban legend that the real Paul McCartney had died and was replaced with a clone. He said, "Those freaks was right when they said you were dead." Ouch. They took shots at each other in several songs before John Lennon, unfortunately for him, took a shot himself in 1980 and passed away. Sorry, too soon? So while the concept of the diss track preceded the creation of hip-hop music, which many people say was in the year 1973, the genre was able to build upon it in ways that had previously not been seen. To reference something we'll see later, you made it a hot line, I made it a hot song. The common belief is that the first notable diss track in hip-hop was in 1984, as a part of something called the Roxanne Wars. A rap group named UTFO released a song called Roxanne, Roxanne, about a guy trying to win over a girl but getting turned down. The song became a big hit in the hip-hop scene. And maybe the group started to feel itself a bit, get a little Hollywood, because they canceled the radio show appearance that they'd promised to a DJ named Mr. Magic and a producer named Marley Marl. A 14-year-old girl named Shantae Gooden was walking by and overheard the two complaining about it. She said, "How about we make a response to the Roxanne song to get them back?" So they went to Marley Marl's apartment and they recorded Roxanne's Revenge over the same beat as Roxanne Roxanne. Shantae took on the rap name Roxanne Shantae and spent the whole song turning the UTFO guys down and calling them lame as hell in 80s slang. The song kicked off a phenomenon that was even bigger than the original song, and it prompted UTFO to go get another girl, Adelaida Martinez, to make a different response track, calling herself the real Roxanne. I don't think anyone expected what happened next, but once people saw how much attention these diss tracks were getting, everybody started rapping about it. People were pretending to be Roxanne, family members of Roxanne, just trying to add to the lore. There were at least 30 more responses, and some people even say there were like as many as 100. So around the same time, there were also disputes about where hip-hop in New York was born. Many people accept that it was in the Bronx, but some people in Queens and Brooklyn were kind of making a push to say otherwise. This led to a different set of diss tracks known as the Bridge Wars. They sometimes got a little personal, like when Boogie Down Productions made the song South Bronx and picked fun at Queens rapper MC Shan getting dropped from his label. For the most part though, compared to what we're going to see, these early diss tracks were all in good fun. Some were even based on stories and not reality, but in general, they never got too disrespectful. Things started to shift in the 90s with the East Coast versus West Coast beef. So the roots of hip hop, as we established, come from New York, but as the sound was gaining popularity, people outside of New York were starting to rap. Some of the people who were doing that the best and getting the most attention for it were in California, Compton, California to be exact. That's where the rap group NWA, which included Ice Cube, Eazy-E, and Dr. Dre, were skyrocketing onto the scene. Some East Coast rappers didn't take too kindly to sharing that limelight. In 1991, Bronx rapper Tim Dog released his song Compton, not leaving much to imagination with the title. He said he never really had a personal issue with NWA, but he didn't like how much attention the record labels were giving him. I think in 2024, the word for that is clout chasing. While he might not have known them, that didn't stop him from getting kind of personal on the record. He mentioned Dr. Dre's accusations of domestic violence, and then separately said he would fuck Dr. Dre's girlfriend. Fighting words. Snoop Dogg, who has no familial relationship with Tim Dog, to be clear, defended Dr. Dre and went at Tim on the song Fuck with Dre Day, saying some very mean things about Tim Dog's mother that I won't repeat. The NWA crew wasn't new to the diss track at this point. In fact, by 1991, they were already dissing each other. Ice Cube had left the group in 1989, not on particularly good terms, and between 1989 and 1991, the old members of the group were taking little shots at him here and there. After tension had built up for a little while, Ice Cube finally decided to respond with the song No Vaseline, calling the old members of NWA and their manager phony, using a lot of euphemisms for homosexuality along the way. The diss hasn't aged particularly well in terms of like what someone could say and not get in a lot of trouble, and it's kind of jarring to hear Cube talk like this, especially knowing he was like gonna be the dude in Are We There Yet? But we see words and diss tracks getting a little bit nastier and more personal here. And thankfully there was no actual like death or violence associated with this little spat, or with this earlier iteration of the East Coast West Coast hip hop beef. But the same can't be said for later developments in that war, because now we're getting to Tupac and Biggie. Now there's a lot of Pac and Big content on YouTube, so I'll try to keep this to the songs and the content of those songs only. Pac was the biggest rapper on the West Coast, and one of the biggest in the world in general. He had a session in New York at a studio called Quad Studios in 1994, and when he showed up, he got jumped in the lobby and got shot, but he survived. He believed he was set up by Biggie and his manager slash label guy Diddy, especially after Biggie released the song Who Shot Ya a few months later. There is a lot of debate about whether this song is about Pac. If we go on Genius to check the lyrics, and by the way, shout out to Genius. I really appreciate people who go on Genius and annotate stuff. Even if they get it wrong, they're trying their best. I have somebody who does that for my own songs, and like it legit makes my day when I see it. So thank you, Genius, for making this video possible. Not a sponsor. But if we go on Genius and we check out the lyrics, you can see why some people are skeptical. The opening line of the verse, "Who shot you? Separate the weak from the obsolete. Hard to creep these Brooklyn streets," is a point against it being a Pac diss, because Quad Studios is in Manhattan. Later in the verse, Biggie says slaughter, electrical tape around your daughter, but Pac didn't have any kids. And Biggie later said this song was written 3 months before Pac's shooting, so either he's a criminal mastermind, or it's just an unrelated song. But while Biggie might not have been sitting there thinking about Pac while he wrote this song, it was a bit of an if the shoe fits situation. Many believe that Diddy picked this song as one of Big's singles because of the media frenzy and attention that would come with it, with people thinking it was about Pac. Pac spent most of the year 1995 in jail, so he had plenty of time to sit and stew and get really angry about it. And when he finally responded in 1996, you could tell he was mad. One of the first lines in Hit 'Em Up, which was Pac's response song, is, "That's why I fucked your bitch, you fat motherfucker." And unlike the Tim Dog situation, Pac might not have been exaggerating. In late 1995, he collaborated with Biggie Smalls' wife, Faith Evans, on a song Wonder Why They Call You Bitch, and they took a picture together at the set of Pac's video for California Love. Rumors were quickly spreading that they had an affair. There is some debate about whether or not it actually happened, and everyone involved in the story has said one thing or another at different times. But whether it happened or not, a lot of people believed it did, including maybe Biggie himself. 2 weeks before Hit 'Em Up came out, Biggie said on the song Brooklyn's Finest with Jay-Z, "If Faith have twins, she'd probably have 2 Pacs." Someone asked him about the thought process behind this line in an interview as well, and shout out to Biggie Central for archiving this. I'll put a link in the description as well.
Was that a diss towards Tupac? Was it a diss towards Faith? Or was it even a diss at all?
It was a diss, but I was just upset at the time, you know what I'm saying?
Hit 'Em Up leaves nothing to question about who the song is about. Biggie's government name is on it, let alone the name Biggie. And Pac specifies that this isn't just for rap, this is for real. He wants to kill him. Many people already know where this tragic story ends. Later in 1996, Pac was shot and killed in a drive-by in Las Vegas. His murder went unsolved for years. But in December 2023, Dwayne Keith Davis was finally charged for this crime. He pled not guilty. There is some debate about the motive, with some referencing a brawl at a casino with Davis's nephew, and others crediting the ongoing East Coast-West Coast rap war that songs like Hit 'Em Up and Who Shot Ya were a part of. In 1997, Biggie was also tragically killed in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles. Nobody has ever been arrested for this crime, but there are people who theorize and speculate that Suge Knight, the owner of Death Row Records, which is the label that Pac was signed to, might have had something to do with it. I'm not saying that, but people say that. These cases are complex situations, and there is so much content on YouTube going into more detail about them. I bring them up just to give a little backstory, but my goal is to look at the content of the actual diss tracks. 10 years before Hit 'Em Up, during the Roxanne Wars, diss tracks were more about stories and poking fun, and they were less personal. In the early 1990s, we can see the tone really kind of shift. While Tim Dog, to my knowledge, never did any of the stuff he was talking about doing on that song, he was talking pretty crazy on there. Flash forward a few years, and diss tracks are connected to real-life violence, with the lyrics not just being insulting, but also increasingly personal. And we get to see just how personal these diss tracks can get when we look at another feud between two of the biggest rappers in the late 1990s and early 2000s, Jay-Z and Nas. In 1996, Jay-Z was working on his debut album, Reasonable Doubt, and he asked Nas to come to the studio. He was supposed to do a verse on the song Bring It On, but he never showed up. It set off a chain reaction of petty sneak disses and one-liners about each other, and Jay-Z sampling Nas's voice on the song Dead Presidents 2, and Nas implying that Hov's car was kind of regular. It led to Nas trading more concrete shots with a rapper named Memphis Bleek, who was signed to Jay-Z's label. Finally, Hov decided that he had had enough, and he showed up to Hot 97's Summer Jam concert in 2001. And premiered a new song called Takeover. Most of the diss was aimed at Prodigy of Mobb Deep, who also happens to be from Queensbridge like Nas. He makes fun of him for being a ballerina as a child, put up a picture of it on the Jumbotron. That's where the saying "end up on the Summer Jam screen" comes from, if anyone's ever heard that. But he ended his live performance with the line, "Ask Nas, he don't want it with Hov." Talk about a cliffhanger. The song actually wasn't finished when he performed it, but he went back very soon after and did an entire 32-bar verse about Nas. He attacked him methodically, making fun of him for falling off, saying that he never lived his raps, he had a one good album every 10-year average, he broke out a calculator on him, that his bodyguard had a better verse than him on his song Uchi Wally, and going back to his sample of Nas's voice on Reasonable Doubt, he says, "You made it a hot line, I made it a hot song." And to top it all off, he implied that he knew something about something else that Nas would know about. More on that later. This wasn't as violent of a diss as Hit 'Em Up, or even the Tim Dog song, really. But it was a very articulately mean and personal takedown of Nas. People thought Nas's career was over, but the response he had at the end of 2001 completely flipped the script. Ether is one of the meanest songs ever recorded. He calls him Gay Z, calls his label Cockafella Records, says he has sucking lips, says he got his whole rap style from Biggie, and that Eminem killed him on his own song Renegade. This diss resonated so hard that to ether someone has become a verb for rap fans. Jay-Z did try to respond with his song Super Ugly, where he reveals the tidbit that he hinted at the end of Takeover, which is that he had a 3-year affair with Nas's baby mother. He goes into detail about it, and it got so nasty that Jay-Z's own mom called a radio station and asked him to stop, and he ended up apologizing. and the people generally preferred Ether to Super Ugly. Although Takeover versus Ether is a debate you'd still get hip-hop fans arguing about today. I love Nas, but I would probably pick Takeover. These two finally pieced it up in 2005 and have gone on to collaborate together since. It's nice to see them get the opportunity to do something that Big and Pac never got the opportunity to, which is piece it up. But still, the Takeover and Ether era is a very important footnote in the history of the diss track. Never before have we seen disses get this personally vicious. To sit here and go through every diss track in hip-hop in the 2000s and 2010s would be an exercise in seeing how many camera batteries I can burn through. There are so many to choose from, and we can be here all day. I'll give you the spark notes. Some were violent, like the Gucci Mane Jeezy beef. The two of them fell out when they collaborated on a song and then fought over whose song it was. Jeezy dissed him on the song Stay Strapped in 2005 and implied that he would put $10,000 on somebody stealing Gucci Mane's icy chain. A few weeks later, a group of men broke into Gucci's house and tried to take that chain. And Gucci shot and killed one of them, Pookie Loc, who happened to be signed to Jeezy's label. Then Gucci went and hit the studio and recorded the song Truth, where he said, "Go dig your partner up. Bet he can't say shit." The two sorta pieced it up when they did a Versus in 2020, but to be honest, like if you watch that, there was a lot of tension. And this was a markedly violent beef, with specific lyrics about said violence. And we're gonna see a lineage for that in the future. Other disses that I love are a little more zany and silly, like Lil B's t-shirts and buttons when he dissed Joe Budden. Eminem has had countless feuds in his career that could be dissected in their own video. One of them was with Benzino, and funny enough, he just took more shots at Benzino on the Lyrical Lemonade album that just came out. Also, weird fun fact, did you know that Benzino is Coi Leray's dad? And also Chavo's dad? A recent favorite take on the diss track is My Favorite Color, who has been ethering dudes on Twitter.
Shut up, bald nigga. Shut up, bald nigga.
With little response videos. It's fascinating. I highly recommend checking it out. He also dissed Dan Schneider from Nickelodeon. Hilarious. Great content. So I can't sit here and chronicle every diss track ever, but instead I want to take a larger look at how the tone and content of them have shifted over the years. The biggest shift that I think I can see over time is how much they're based in reality. The Roxanne Wars, remember, were kind of a work of fiction. Even what Ice Cube was saying on No Vaseline, he was saying some really horrible stuff about Eazy-E and Dr. J, but it was all more like theoretical and not like I saw you there doing that. When Tupac said he slept with Faith Evans, I think that was a big shift in the way that people approach diss tracks. We saw Nas and Jay-Z reference specific things and moments about each other in their disses. And jumping to today's biggest diss tracks, we can see a clear line there. The two biggest rap beefs in the 2010s were based off information being revealed, rather than scathing insults, although the latter usually came after the former. And both of them also involve Drake. In 2015, Meek Mill tweeted that Drake didn't write his own raps. This led to Drake responding with Charged Up, which was a little more of a warning shot, but then decimating Meek a few days later with Back to Back. Did you know this song was co-produced by Nav? He made fun of Meek for riding the coattails of then-girlfriend Nicki Minaj, asking him, "Is that a world tour or your girls tour?" And then coined the other phrase Twitter fingers by pointing out that Meek was talking crazy on the internet and maybe not as much in real life. Meek responded with "wanna know," but it mostly fell on deaf ears and it was a little too late. I have another video coming very soon on Meek Mill where I'll talk a little bit more about that, so I'll save most of that for then. But Back to Back is notable because Drake's response is so rooted in Meek's real life. And the song was a smash hit. It peaked at number 21 on the Billboard charts, and it got nominated for a Grammy. This is what the people wanted to hear. Drama involving real life facts about artists. Not just you're whack, you're stupid, you like men, you're bad at rapping, I'm gonna kill you, like whatever. People were kind of sick of that. They're like, give me the reality show content. I mean, there's a perfect line between reality shows becoming really popular and diss tracks becoming more reality based. So when the tides turned on Drake, he faced the same fate that he put Meek Mill through. Drake and Pusha T have been taking shots at each other for years, mostly inheriting a beef that each of their mentors, respectively Lil Wayne and Pharrell, have been dealing with since the mid-2000s. It expanded once Pusha's other mentor, Kanye West, decided that he had a problem with Drake too. Pusha was taking little shots here and there about the Drake ghostwriter fiasco that Meek Mill had revealed. And one day in 2018, Drake decided enough was enough, and he responded with Duppy Freestyle. He basically says, "How are you gonna pick on me for having writers when your boss, Kanye West, has writers? In fact, I've literally written songs for Kanye West," is what Drake said. And honestly, that's like a pretty valid point. It's a little off topic for this video, but like Pusha never really addressed that part. Anyway, Drake also went on to say that Pusha probably didn't live his raps, and then he name drops his fiance, Virginia Williams, which might have been what really set Pusha off over the edge. And Pusha went and recorded The Story of Adidon. Now this is a real takedown. Even before you click play, the cover art, where Pusha dug up an old photo of Drake doing a blackface sort of makeup thing. That just tells you what we're getting into here. Pusha reveals in the song that Drake has been hiding a child and has actually had a son this entire time, and either hasn't talked about it because he's not proud of who the baby mother is, or hasn't talked about it because he's saving the reveal for an Adidas press run. Pusha definitely got some old-fashioned mean rap beef stuff off in this diss too, especially about Drake's producer 40, who suffers from MS. But the part that resonated the most with people and got people talking the most was the revelation that Drake had a kid. Being a father is not a diss, but it's interpreted that way in the context. And it's a great example of the way that diss tracks have changed. The song is almost more effective as like a TMZ post than it is as a traditional diss track, but that didn't matter. To many people, although not everybody, but to many people, Drake lost because he had a kid. Like, you look at that on paper, you don't really understand. But when you listen to it and you understand the societal context, you're like, wow, he kind of got killed. And we can see that same kind of TMZ approach with Nicki's response to Meg. Nicki spends most of the song listing off rumors and dramas around Meg, including her being romantically linked to some other rappers like Tory Lanez, DaBaby, Trey Songz, and G-Eazy. She references her bad business deals with Carl Crawford, having to pay Future for a feature on her song Pressurelicious. I'm glad she did that, by the way, because that song is fire. Pretty underrated. Probably my favorite Meg Thee Stallion song. Thanks for paying Future for that feat, because he bodied that. And Nicki says that Meg got a nose job. It gets a little more grim when Nicki goes at her for getting shot in the foot by Tory Lanez, and also references her dead mother. She even hints at more information coming later. And I think that says a lot about the state of the diss track in 2024. Are people really listening for the bars, or are they listening for the reveal of information? It feels like a lot of people are just tuned in for the tea, and if they get a good diss track along the way, then so be it. Thanks to social media, we already know so much about our favorite artists. You used to only find out stuff like that when they did radio interviews or magazines. Now artists are posting on social media every single day, and God only knows what kind of stuff they're posting. We know so much about them. But even though we know so much, it makes us want the things that are being hidden from us. Like, damn, you tell us all this, but you don't tell us these things? Then I really want to know these things because they must be spicy. It's the unfettered access to these people that makes these crumbs so appealing to so many people. He wrote what? He slept with who? He has a kid? You see where I'm going with this. I'm also not trying to say that this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just acknowledging a trend that I haven't seen anybody really mention. Even some of the biggest pop songs today are built on the same premise. Olivia Rodrigo had her breakout year in 2021 with her album Sour. Songs like Driver's License and Deja Vu, many people are aware, are about a guy named Joshua Bassett. People felt like they were involved in the relationship because they knew both of these people. And that drew everyone in and helped make her a star. Of course, her blueprint for that comes from Taylor Swift, whose fans know exactly which songs are about exactly which boyfriends. And that's kind of part of the fun. The more we know about these people, the more we get invested in finding out what we don't know. But there is a point where it gets too real. And that's when it comes to real life acts of violence making it onto a track. Brooklyn rapper Kyle Rich went viral for his song Naughty Bop in 2022, making fun of Nadi Osama, a 14-year-old kid who was stabbed to death in a train station. The song came with a dance that mimicked the way that Nadi was stabbed. A lot of people didn't know the context, and they were doing the dance anyway, including like old white teachers. It was a pretty sad situation, and it's honestly disrespectful, like beyond repair. I'm not trying to absolve Kyle Rich from the responsibility at all, but there is a lineage of rappers doing this, especially in the past like 10 years from the Chicago scene. And in the Naughty Bop situation, it's the dance trend and like maybe even the fact that it samples like a kids show theme song, the Backyardigans, that just makes it feel even more dystopian. And the sport aspect of the diss track goes completely out the window when people are talking about real acts of violence, whether they committed them or not. Everyone has a different line that they want to draw about how far a diss track can go before it's too far. I think making fun of dead children, for me, is definitely past the line that I would draw. And also encouraging further violence. When we see stuff like that, we need to ask ourselves, like, what are we really doing here? So the diss track began as a light jab at the competition, but it's evolved into something so different. In the 1990s, we saw it become a little more vulgar and passionate, but sometimes also lead to real life violence. In the 2000s, 2010s, and today, we see both of those trends increasing. Now today we get audio tea spilling and songs that tell you exactly when crimes were committed. What will the diss track look like in the future? Will they get pettier? Probably. Will the violent ones get even more dystopian? I really do hope not. One thing that won't change is me running to my computer whenever a high-profile diss track drops. You can always count on an A-lister dropping a diss track to break the internet. I mean, I get on YouTube and watch the downfalls of people that I've literally never heard of. So of course I'll watch two of my favorite rappers say mean things about each other. There is something about human nature that makes us love to watch a fight. Some diss tracks are more like Ali versus Frazier, heavyweight title matches that pit two of the greatest of their time against each other. Some are more like that custody of Dominic ladder match from WWE, where there's so much context and lore and backstory that if you tried to explain what was going on to somebody, you might feel like a crazy person. And others are just car crashes that we can't turn away from. But when my faves are dropping a diss track or getting a diss track dropped about them, no matter what, I'll be front row with some rap snacks and the lyrics loaded up on Genius for a read along.